Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff, one of two podcasts I do. The other is brand new. It's called The Angel. This one, the Accelerator, is for entrepreneurs, founders, startups, also for family offices, for venture capitalists, for people on the money side like family offices and investment firms. So it's great to be here with you. Make sure to look for us on all the major podcasting platforms. Make sure to rate us and subscribe, we hope, and give us a good review. That would all be great. We're on all the major platforms: Apple, Amazon, Audible, you name it. And in terms of video, we're also on Spotify, audio and video, and YouTube. So check all that out and go to my website, michaelconniff.com, michaelconniff.com. Today, I am very enthusiastic about welcoming to the podcast Aviv Shalgi. He's the founder and CEO of Solar Simplified. Welcome, Aviv. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
And Aviv is coming to us from Chicago, but I have to ask the most interesting. I think I'm not saying there aren't other things in your background that are more interesting, but the fact that you did work in Israeli intelligence seems particularly pertinent today. The New York Times has front page stories about intelligence and leaks and all kinds of things. So, what did you do? What did you do for Israel in military intelligence?
Sure.
What can you tell us, or what can you
yes.
What can you lie about?
so not a whole much. No. So I spent 6 years in the Israeli military as an intelligence officer, mostly around satellite intelligence, so imagery, and basically doing mostly tech stuff. I would say tech and operations. Around satellites and rockets and space, and what today I think in the United States is under the Space Corps.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
The Space Corps. Wow. That shows you how far we've come, if we've come far at all. Is just one more question about that before we move on to more pressing matters.
Sure.
When you look at what's happening today in intelligence, is it completely different than what you experienced in your time? And you were in how many years ago in intelligence?
Oh, I separated more than a decade ago.
Okay,
so it's been a little while.
So 10 years ago, what's the difference between then and now?
First of all, I would not know because I'm not there anymore.
I knew you were going to say
that. But technologies change, things get updated. There's definitely different ways of acquiring intelligence. I would assume that today, unlike, I don't know if compared to 10 years ago, but maybe to 15 or 20 years ago, you could have gotten some intelligence from public media, watching some other country's news and TV and stuff like that. Like, could learn some things about that other country or listening to the radio. But today, there's so much more information online, because we're all hooked to this phone thing and we report about everything that's happening. And so I think today it's much tougher for governments to hide things, especially things that are in plain sight, broad of daylight and stuff like that. And also there's a lot, it's probably, I would guess, this was definitely not my side of intelligence, so I'm not a professional to ask about that, but I assume you can probably get a whole lot more information, countries that want us ill, or countries that we want to, get intelligence on. There's a lot more cybersecurity, social media, a lot more stuff that are, intertwined and interconnected, I would assume, today versus 10, 20 years ago.
It shows how fast the world has changed. 10 years is like 100 used to be. So we want to talk in a second about Solar Simplified, your company, which has a very interesting business model, I think. But first, I want to ask you about your journey from there to here. So there being Israel, your background, and also how that intelligence experience kind of informed what you did and what you got interested in.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's been a long journey. So I switched careers 5 times until I became an entrepreneur. Um, and so to anybody who's listening, who's thinking of career changes or, is not sure that their current job is the right fit or the current industry is the right fit for them, you know, I applaud you for even getting that way, and thinking about these things. It's definitely not easy to change careers. Um, but, for me, it worked out because it took me a couple of tries, but I ended
What,
up
what
finding
was
something that I'm
what was one
very much in love with.
what was 1 through 5? Just quickly, like what kind of job?
Sure. So 6 years in the military, doing intelligence. A couple of years as a hardware engineer. I designed chips, um, um, that we have in our laptops and phones and stuff like
Sure.
that. I worked in management consulting, doing strategic consulting around finance, acquisitions, things of that nature, for like Fortune 500 companies. Um, I worked in a startup as an employee. I worked in VC, and then I became an entrepreneur. Um,
Okay, so it actually sounds like the perfect background. So let me start with some of the more recent ones.
yeah,
When you worked in a startup, what kind of startup was it? And how would you compare working as an employee in a startup, assuming, I guess it sounds like maybe you had no equity or no piece of the action. How would you compare that to today when you're truly in an entrepreneurial situation? What's the difference in the mindset?
sure. So I was an early employee, so I did actually have, kind of, I wouldn't say like the founder, but the immediate hires after that. So I did actually have a nice stake at the company, which is very nice. It's actually a public company, so it turned out well. Um,
May I
um,
ask you what the company was?
Yes, it used to be called Taptica. They've rebranded. They're called Tremor. It's an unknown company that's traded on Nasdaq, but it's in advertising. It's advertising technologies. So
Oh, no
algorithms on
kidding.
how do you figure out who should watch what ad online or on your phone. Um,
Okay.
Instead of just showing people, what I call the spray and pray method. Just show the same ad to everybody and pray that enough
We,
people are going to click or
we
download or buy or sign up or whatever that campaign's running.
it's It's actually an area I'm really interested in on this podcast. We had Courtney Presto. She has a platform called Presto, but she comes out of the Disney ad tech world and has
Yeah.
developed a way to reward people for looking at ads. Um, so,
hmm
so that's uppermost in my mind, actually. So, what about the VC experience?
Yeah. So I worked in two VCs. I would say one was an actual VC, one was a corporate VC. Um,
Which
in different.
and who were they?
So the corporate VC was actually the same startup after we went public.
Oh,
We
okay.
raised more money than we expected, which we had to use that money because we owed that to the public for it not to be sitting in the checking account of the company not doing anything. So the first group I founded after we went public was an M&A corporate development group, um, where we would go out and buy companies or buy businesses in tangent fields so we could expand our reach. Um, but then it ended up getting to a place where we might have opportunities where we want to invest in companies before we decide whether we want to buy them as a strategic, acquisition, or maybe somebody else is going to buy them and we'll get the financial
Mhm.
return. So started a corporate VC within that company. Um, and then I worked for the VC fund of the University of Chicago, for a
Oh,
couple of years. So it's the university has under the endowment, a fund of, I think it's about $50 million nowadays, that they invest in startups where the endowment wants to get returns. Uh,
sure. And
uh,
does it reflect the Chicago school, that fund? Is there any kind of Milton Friedman action going on?
Um, I would say yes and no. There's definitely, there's a big committee of Chicagoans, that you have to present to. It's not just, an individual person's decision. And many of them, come from the Chicago or even University of Chicago background. So that definitely works. Um,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, it's a VC fund, which just has a single LP, a single investor. It doesn't have multiple, dozens or hundreds of LPs like normal VCs do. Um,
That's kind of a
um,
nice luxury to have, isn't it?
I would say yes and no, because at the end of the day, you have to report to that LP, and they would like you or they might not like you,
Ah,
and I was an associate, back then, so I wasn't the one communicating with the endowment on a daily basis, but there are we had two partners who used to manage the fund back then, and they had daily or weekly meetings with folks from the endowment
mm,
and reports, and it's basically like being almost like being an employee if you have one LP,
mm,
because they are the bosses,
interesting.
they control the money, um, versus a
Yeah.
standard VC that has multiple LPs. You still need to report to them, but I wouldn't say on a daily or weekly basis, usually quarterly or whenever something happens.
Kind of
Right.
diffused
Exactly.
is the word
Exactly.
I would. So when did you start your company? When did Solar Simplified get started?
Yeah, so we started Solar Simplified in June of 2020, so almost 3 years ago. The midst of the pandemic, the world is ending, um, and my co-founders and I were basically trying to come up with an idea that we would like to work on, but that has a market, that there's a need for it. And we were mostly looking at how can we help people save some money? Because if you remember, first few months of COVID, we had the lockdowns happening throughout the country. Everybody thinks it's the zombie apocalypse. We're all going to die. Um, and very, very tough times. And so a lot of people got furloughed. A lot of people got laid off, in the first couple of
Yeah.
months. So we were trying to come up with an idea that would be a good business on one hand, so it could get financial returns, but on the flip side, it could also help people save some money, because we're trying to do a little bit good, to our friends, to our families, to our colleagues, who were struggling. Um, and we ended up starting Solar Simplified because we found this intersection between the renewable space, specifically in solar, and the savings. So basically, Solar Simplified is a platform that connects consumers, anybody who pays an electricity bill, so renters, homeowners, business owners, with a local solar power plant. Has to be local, has to be in their area. The power lines have to be connected. Um,
And it has to be solar. It has to be a local solar power plant. Okay.
correct, correct. Um, and it has to be fairly close to them, let's say up to a couple 100 miles at most.
Mm.
Um, but instead of buying the energy from that power plant, as a consumer, you get a coupon on your utility bill. So you actually pay your utility less than what you would have otherwise paid without us. The size of the coupon depends on how much sunlight was shining on the solar panels that you got associated to. Um,
But
so,
those panels are not
mhm.
typically going to be in your house. They're going to be off in a grid in a
Correct,
somewhere.
correct.
So,
It's a power plant. It's a power plant. It has economies of scale.
mhm.
It's on land, so nobody has to climb roofs. There's less
But
risk.
it could be anywhere, right? It could be in
Has
the,
to be close to you. Has to be close to you. So it can't be in another state.
I see.
Um,
So it's nearby, but it's not your home.
correct.
Um, okay, got it. So you
And it doesn't
offer
cost you anything. I would say that's
how
the big thing. I'm all for putting solar panels on your roof. The problem with that is that it only appeals to about 20% of Americans because it costs,
hmm,
that's statistics from the government. That's not statistics that I collected. But about 80% of Americans can't put solar panels on the roof because they are renting or they live in a high rise or it's a shaded or wooden area or any other reason why they couldn't put it, or they just can't afford it because putting solar panels, it's let's say 20 to $50,000 a household. Um, that's a whole lot of money. Not everybody has that money. Not everybody can has good FICO scores, good lending habits that they could borrow money, get a loan to put up those panels. Um, and so, what do you do if you're in the 80% bucket that can't afford it or just can't physically put it there? We are providing that solution. We're putting the panels elsewhere still fairly close to you, but it's not on your property. It doesn't cost you any money because we can get a mortgage, we can get a bank loan because it's a large facility. And so it doesn't actually cost you anything. All that the consumer needs to do is sign up.
How does the bank loan facility play into it? I got a little confused there.
It saves you from paying for the panels.
So you have the bank loan facility. You
Correct.
Solar Simplified. Okay, got it.
Not
So
Solar Simplified. Our partners that actually do the construction are the ones carrying the loan.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So explain the mechanics of how you're able to provide a discount like this.
Sure. I would say it's fairly straightforward to people who are in the industry. But I'll try to simplify things, for all of our listeners who don't come from the energy space. Basically, there's I would say, it's not necessarily an anomaly, but let's talk about this as an anomaly for a second, just to make things simple, where power plants, it's not their business to go business to consumer, to do mass marketing. So power plants' business is to find the land, get the materials, build the power plant, operate it, maintain it, make sure it's producing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that power plants specifically sell energy at wholesale markets. With us, they can sell it to retail minus the discount. And so if wholesale prices are, let's say, 50 cents on the retail dollar, with us, by giving a 10 or a 20% discount to the retail consumer, they can now sell at 80 cents on the dollar, 90 cents on the dollar, depending on the market and how the regulation works. So let's say if it's a 10% discount, the consumer now saved 10% on their utility bill. They're very happy. The power plant on the flip side sold for 90 cents instead of 50 cents on the dollar. They almost doubled up. So that means that they can afford my service. They'll give us a small piece of that upside because marketing costs money and building tech costs money. And so we will, all of three of us, the consumer, Solar Simplified, and the developer, the owner of the power plant, would split that anomaly 3 ways.
Okay, interesting. Now, I must say, so one of the things I find really intriguing, and maybe it's a sign of the maturation of the solar market, but you have gone this far into the podcast, more than halfway through, without mentioning that you're saving the world. And I find this to be very interesting on a lot of levels, and also surprising. So it's what you're really selling is a discount for consumers on energy. You're not selling, at least you're not marketing do-gooders, doomsayers, etc., who feel like they have a personal stake in what's going on with climate change. And what's interesting as well, and I'll wrap up this little interlude by saying it comes at a time. I'll just give you one example from today's newspaper. In the New York Times, there was a story about surfers and how surfers in St. Augustine, Florida, the waves no longer break. The waves no longer break. There's no surfing. Surfing is over in a place where it used to be a hotbed. That's just one tiny example, but it's in the papers every day, throughout the papers now, and there is a consensus on it. So why? I'm assuming you're a very smart guy. You made this decision consciously. So why did you make that decision?
So I would say I'll split my answer to 2. First of all, it is powered by renewables. So it is powered by solar, which is a renewable energy. But to me, I want to appeal to the largest crowd that I could appeal to. And yes, we have a whole lot of customers who care about solar. They can't put solar on their property, as we mentioned before, because of all sorts of reasons. And so they would sign up with us because they want to support, more renewable in their area specifically. I think that's one segment. If I would appeal just to that segment, at least in my opinion, has mostly been sold actual panels on their property too. Because if you're really passionate about climate change, you would have, in the last 20 years, probably tried to get panels on your property or try to get, a small wind, generator or something of that nature, geothermal, depending on where you
You're
live.
in that, you're in that, you're in that 20% you were talking
Exactly,
about. That
exactly,
20%. And you're so this is aimed at the
exactly. I think the
80%.
80% is split. Some people care about climate, and they're welcome to be our customers. There's a whole lot of people who might not care as much.
You won't turn them away. You
Definitely
won't turn
not. I
them
wouldn't
away.
turn away anybody, but there's also a big segment of the population that um, think that renewables cost them money or that renewables is expensive. And
Oh yeah,
we are here to basically say
absolutely.
this is a discount program, doesn't cost you any money, doesn't cost you your taxes or anything like that. It's a legitimate business because of the way that the energy markets are built, that we're able to extract value where people couldn't extract that value previously. And so to me, also talking about the savings is important. Talking about creation of local jobs, this has to be local. That means that the laborers that are building the power plants are probably your neighbors, maybe in the same town, maybe in a nearby town. Um, it creates the actual power plant pays taxes to the municipality, to the county that it's located in. So it gets more tax dollars through the door. There's multiple benefits, in my opinion, to what we're doing. And I like to talk about all of the benefits because different things would appeal to different people and they're all welcome to be our customers.
So you have 36 customers, and how many states are you in so far?
3,600,
Um,
not 36.
Forgive me.
But thank you.
3,600 customers, and
Yes.
that represents how many utilities?
Uh, 5 or 6, I think.
Okay, so a lot
And
of
we're expanding all the time,
room to grow for sure.
for
So
sure.
30, of the 3,600, let's go with your assumption that they're part of that 80%. Um, do you have any idea, or have you done any research on what percentage of those could care less about climate change or solar power, any of it, versus those who are, maybe not as passionate as those who put the panels on, but are still committed to the idea and want to help?
That's a good question. We actually have not run that survey, but I'll talk to the team. We probably should. I can tell that people who are anti-solar are definitely not joining my company. Um,
Right.
People who are
How
anti-renewables in
can you
general.
think about what you just said? How can you be against the sun? I mean,
Well, listen, I truly believe it's a free country, to each their own.
yeah,
If if
yeah.
if you have something against the world of renewables or the world of solar energy, I'm not here to
Well,
educate you
well,
differently.
well, Aviv, as you know from your background in military intelligence, they hate us for our freedom. But I digress.
Right.
Um, so, okay, so this is interesting. So, what's the upside for this company, and where are you in the company cycle? Where are you in terms of are you raising money? Are you what's going to happen? You hope.
I mean, I would say let me start off with the simpler question, which is the raising question, and then we can talk about strategy and forward looking. Um, so I would say to any entrepreneur who asks for my opinion, um, you know, I'm always raising money. There's no situation where you're not raising money. Um, assuming that you are a startup that needs to get funded. If you're a business that has profits and you're reinvesting the profits to grow the business, that's a completely different type of beast. But in the startup space, if you want to do the hockey stick and you have to get a lot of funding in order to get to scale, you're always raising. So the answer is yes. Um, so if there's any investors who are interested in climate tech, who are listening, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to share more information. Um,
Mhm.
I would say on your bigger or your broader question of where are we headed, the goal is to be, national. 5, 6 utilities is definitely not being national. We're covering right now a few states, mostly in the Northeast and the Midwest. Um, all the way from like New York, New Jersey, and Maine, and like the East Coast, Illinois here in the Midwest, and we're continuously expanding. But the goal, like my personal goal, is to be nationwide. So any person in any state who wants to reach out to us and save some money and support renewables in their area could do that. So we have 40 something more states to go.
And also, I think it's worth pointing out because you and I have spoken before, but we talked at some length about how complex the regulatory situation is. Every state is different, right?
Yeah. Yes. So for us, every state is different. From a regulatory perspective, every utility is different from a tech perspective. So we have to integrate with the utility. Again, the savings go on your utility bill. And so, we have to make sure that we're talking to the utility in a language they would understand. And utilities, I got to tell you, they're all wonderful people, at least the people that we communicate with, but it's very archaic technology. And you want it to be that way because you don't want the lights start to flickering, every time there's a software update.
Right.
This is not an industry that it's okay. It's kind of like the banking system. It's not okay for things to, break apart every Monday and Friday. Just like you have downtimes in most software providers, even the biggest ones out there. And so the technologies are very archaic. And you have to work through that. You have to work together with their team in order to make those integrations, make sure that things are working flawlessly for the consumer. But even if there's some issue, it's between us and the background.
What does your team look like? What kind of team do you have in place?
Yeah, I mean we're a completely work from home team. Every person works out of their home, and they're spread out across the country. It's tech people and marketing people. I would say.
How many of you are there on either side of
We're
that?
8 people total right now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So you're kind of at a tipping point. It feels like it seems that you've proven the
Yeah.
concept. Like the proof of concept is there. You have revenues. People are using it. People are
Yeah.
buying it. And in a fascinating way, I think it actually is a sign of the times that you're not marketing it as save the world with your Groupon like coupon. But you're like save some money. Who can argue with that?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So what's the horizon for this? What would be the exit? What would be the happiest outcome from your perspective as of April 10th, 2023?
I mean, I can tell you that I never plan for an exit. The goal, and that's what I preach to any entrepreneur who talks to me, whether
That's
I'm
smart.
sitting on their board
Yeah, yeah.
or just come for me for advice. Um, you can't plan for the exit because if you're planning for the exit, you're gonna make certain decisions that are not necessarily in the best intention of your business. You might decide to grow on a losing unit economics, for example, which is something that I personally don't believe in, even though there are amazing companies that are built on losing money per customer. Excuse me. So my intention is to build a profitable company that is, making good to the world and helping its consumers save money and helping its, power plant customers make more money and everybody's happy. That is my goal. At the end of the day, there's two options of how to help our investors as well as our, employees, to get liquidation for, their stocks. It's to get acquired or to go public. Those are the two options.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
so, which one of them is it going to be? Who knows? I'm not planning this one or that one because we have some more way to go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if the right player comes along and offers a decent check that my investors and my employees would be happy with, I would say never.
Never
I
say
had
never.
that happen to me in my previous startup. Out of the blue, came in an acquiring company, made us an offer we couldn't refuse. everybody ended up happy. Um,
And
really
you
nice.
didn't refuse it. Well, you've been a great guest for us today. Aviv Shalgi is the founder and CEO of Solar Simplified in Chicago. You've been listening to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me. A podcast, a companion podcast to the Angel. We're on all the major podcast platforms. Also on. You can see our beautiful faces on Facebook. Pardon me, not on Facebook, on Spotify and YouTube. We'd love you to subscribe. We'd love you to rate us and to tell your friends and to share and do all those things um, to make our podcast a bigger and happier place, just like Aviv's company. So, Aviv, thank you so much for doing this. You were a terrific guest, and we look forward to your progress in the future.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
That's it for the Accelerator. And like I like to say, keep listening and keep watching because we'll be back before you know it.